Like any good workshop build out video, the first step is going to be we have to clean all this stuff up, get it out of the way, and take it off the wall, right? So we want a nice clean wall to work with. We want to make sure that we get everything that's on the ground out of the way so we're not having to constantly shuffle things around. Luckily at this house, I've got a pull house next door to store things in. I've also got pre-made workbenches all the way around the walls I can stack stuff on, and there's plenty of space in this room to just move it to the other side if I need to and get it out of the way. You can see where a lot of my clamps and stuff are just covered in rust. That's some of the humidification problems I was talking about. So I'm probably going to have to buy a dehumidifier and put in here just because the temperatures swing so much in the southeast between the morning and the afternoon. I think that's what's doing it because the walls are all fully insulated. The attic's insulated. I am going to go ahead and put ceilings in here because it's just a rafter. It's just an attic space with rafters in it right now, and that should help with some of the extreme temperatures. And I've also got a split unit air conditioner I'm probably going to stick in. But for now, you just see me grabbing all my tools off the wall so that I can take the hooks down, take the wood down that's up there that I was using to keep wire and clamps on. And I've got a couple of different clamp systems we'll make another video on that I'm going to start putting up on the walls. I'm not going to buy any pre-made ones. I'm going to make everything out of wood because I am a beginner woodworker and I am trying to utilize my shop and build my skills. So some of the best stuff I can do to save time, save money, and teach myself is just get in there and get that experience going. The racks that run across the top of the wall, I'm going to keep all of those up there. I plan to leave the L brackets and everything. They are nailed and screwed in, so it's a little bit difficult to pull them off. But I could if I needed to. But I like having all that extra storage for the various wire that I've got stored around the top. And if I need to store wood, I'm planning to store it horizontally up high. And then I'm going to try to do some vertical storage for the sheets of wood if I'm building out a desk or anything that's using plywood. That window looks into the pool house. There is no gap between them. It's all interior. So we'll probably end up having to fill that in one day. But as you can see here, just trying to get up a bunch of the sawdust and everything from some previous work I was doing and projects that where it just got left under the table. I'm going to roll around Husky cart. It's empty right now for the most part. I need to buy some foam to put in there. Now that we've got the wall cleaned up and the floor space opened up, it's time for us to go ahead and start working on building out the dimensions of the table so that we can get a cut list built and decide what type of materials we need to pick up when we run to the store later. So we're just going to grab the tape measure and we're just going to clip it to the bottom of that far workstation or far workbench that we're keeping and run it to the length behind the door. Like I said, I wanted to utilize this full space. I didn't want to leave anything to waste because we can always just add cabinets or kind of shift the miter saw around if we need to, if we find other uses for it. So not being too precise here, just making sure I've got a general idea of how much I need. It's basically going to be about 7 feet on either side once the miter saw gets put in the center. And I can just go ahead and, mark my center line. Like I said, I wanted 100 inches. I'm just going to put it right at the edge of that window. And that's just so I have room on both sides for whatever length of lumber I want to use whenever we start cutting up and making, we're going to be making everything from cutting boards to desks, tables. I need a lot of tables for the house. I'm also going to be doing entryway pieces as far as benches. I've got a couple of ideas I'm going to start to try to do for that. Especially I have a second baby on the way, so I'm trying to build out a nice little conversion where we can stack up, baby carriers on it and still have room for it to just be a standard bench later. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking a straight edge level. This way I can use my center line and I can mark it from the wall all the way down to the floor and then take that straight edge, line it up with the wall, which we assume is straight, and mark a center line. Off the center line, like I mentioned earlier in the video, we're doing a 27-inch measurement. So we're going to take our miter saw, make sure it'll fit in that 27 inches. And 27 is a number I got off of other YouTube videos where it is kind of a universal number where the majority of miter saws, even ones that are a little bit nicer than this one, would fit within it. And I wanted to make sure that this table is going to be usable for years to come, not just for this one specific miter saw. I also wanted to make sure that my miter saw could turn in either direction. That way I don't have to flip the material to do specific cuts. Because I am new, I know I'm going to be making mistakes, so the easier I can make it on me to not make those mistakes, because a lot of the learning I do is visual, it's just going to make life quicker, basically, or easier on me going forward. So I'm taking my center line mark, and I'm just doing 13.5 inches from either one of them with the tape measure, and making sure that it's outside the miter saw. Like I said, I like to look at things visually just to make sure it's going to work out for me anytime that I can, because a lot of times, we may try to think of everything, but we might miss something. And this just helps us avoid making those mistakes. Again, we use the straight edge. That way we can kind of carry these lines out. That way when we come back to build the table, we've got our marked points of where the worktop tabletops are going to stop and start. The next step in this process is going to be try to check out the depth that we need to build this workbench. I know many people build their workbenches to be exactly 2 feet or somewhere near 26 inches, depending on who's building it and what they're building it for. The existing tabletops or workstations in this area are about 2 feet in most areas, so I knew that wouldn't work for this miter saw. It's not as nice as like the Festool miter saw, where it's got those flexible arms that kind of fold upon itself, and I think Bosch makes one like that. Instead, this one slides back and forth on rails, so we have to allow a lot of room for that. Also, the dust collection port on this is at the very back of the rails, so I wanted to leave about an extra inch or so of space so I can get a dust collection port to the back to kind of help feed and collect that dust. I'm not sure if I'm going to attach a hose to it or just let it dump out into the table and get picked up by ports. I'm going to watch a few more videos and make my decision off of that. But as you saw, I went ahead and I turned the miter saw in both directions, and then I slid it forward and back just to make sure it would get the full clearance that it needs. Again, you can see the rust that built up on the rails. Like, that's all in the last few months, just from all the rain we've gotten. So I've got to figure out how to clean all that rust up so it slides nice and smooth again. It still works, but I'm going to have to, I just don't like my tools being that torn up. All right, so here's the dust port that I've got my hand on right now. And like I said, I'm trying to leave space for that just to make sure that we can get as much dust out of the air as possible. I mean, I've worked in shops for a long time on construction sites, and just having dust in your face all day, every day, one, is extremely unhealthy, and two, it's just annoying environment to work in. You definitely get tired of it pretty quick, you know, blowing stuff out of your nose all the time. You'll go in and start coughing out all kinds of dust. So, not very healthy, but we're going to try to fix that as much as we can. As you can see here, I've got the tape measure laid out next to it. We're about 32 inches in, so not quite 3 feet. So I'm just going to go ahead and build the tabletops based off of this measurement at 3 feet. Pretty wide, but once we put cabinets on it and do some other upgrades, it'll be, it'll work out pretty well. We'll do maybe some slides or something to bring stuff closer if we need to. So I have this old 2x4 sitting around from some other home repairs I was doing, and you just see me sitting here lining it up with the existing work tabletop, which is also made out of a 2x4 and a 3/4 inch piece of MDF plywood. I was smart enough to put the box of screws next to me within arm's reach, but as you see, I'm looking around lost for a level because I was not smart enough or planned out enough to go ahead and have it within arm's reach. So having to put a center screw in to support the weight of the wood while I reach behind me to grab the level, finally get it put in place, and that's when I noticed it's a little bit high on the left side. So we're going to have to pull that center screw back out, lower it down, and get it level. The other advantage to having this old piece of 2x4 is it's going to let me go ahead and do some baseline measurements on the back side of the wall to see exactly how much cut materials I need to go ahead and pick up at the store. And it saves me, roughly 6 feet of wood. And with lumber prices being at an all-time high, you definitely want to reuse as much material as you have around the house just to save a few dollars. Because right now, I think a 10-foot 2x4 is about $11, $9 to $11, depending on where you pick it up at. So we're just going to go ahead and toss in 6 screws, 2 on either end, 2 in the middle. Make sure we have plenty of support. And it was really nice and easy thanks to, the walls already being built out. So what kind of woodworking video wouldn't be complete without a trip to Home Depot or whatever your big box store is? So this is us trying to, go in, grab the lumber we need. We've already done our measurements, so we have a rough idea of what we're picking up. In this case, we needed to get 3 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood to make the tabletops out of. We also needed to grab 2 1/2-inch sheets of plywood that I'm going to use to create a box around the miter saw to help with the dust collection system. Granted, that'll be a little while before I put that together, but I wanted to go ahead and pick it up before wood prices get any higher than they already are. So I was kind of looking around for just standard plywood, and they were actually sold out except for one single sheet. I got my son here with me and my girlfriend, my baby mama. We like to keep the family stuff going, so brought them along, and she decided she'd record some of this for me, and very appreciative of it. So just, my struggle to try to find a decent replacement, because the standard sheets of plywood that I was trying to buy, they were going to be about $48 a piece. We ended up having to go with some redwood. I think it was like red maple or something. I'm not a wood expert, so we'll figure that out later. But they had just random sheets stacked on top of each other. That's why you see me sliding them out of the way. The sizes were mixed up. The type of wood was mixed up. I want to make sure to get 3 sheets of the same size, or same thickness and same quality material. And that's why I grabbed these. And there's a $10 difference between this and the standard ones. So these were supposed to be $58 a sheet. And then the 1/2-inch, I believe, was about $11 to $15 a sheet. I don't remember exactly. A lot cheaper for the 1/2-inch than it was for this 3/4 inch. Now that we have all the sheet material that we need, we're going to run over, grab the 2x4s. This is what we're going to use to make all the supports out of, do the railings. As you can see, I'm grabbing a 12-foot piece first, right? This is the last piece that I need to put along the back wall. And then I'm going to grab 10-foot pieces, 6 10-foot pieces for a total of 60 feet of length. Instead of grabbing more 12-foot boards, I realized that I wasn't going to have enough material left over after making the cuts. So it would have just been a waste of money, waste of material. That's why I went ahead and decided to go with the 10-foot boards, because I knew I was cutting 7-foot lengths. But I didn't want to go with 8-foot because there were a couple of pieces that were going to need to be cut longer. Of course, what trip to the hardware store is complete without having to visit the tool aisle and make sure you pick up some new tools. In this case, I wanted to get some wood chisels because I saw some people do some pretty cool things with them, and I didn't have a set, so I thought I'd go ahead and buy a standard set that you can get at any big box store just to get started. You know, I have no idea what quality these are, which ones would be considered good or bad, so I just went ahead and went with the DeWalt ones because a lot of the stuff I have is DeWalt, unless we're talking about my portable tools, and all my portable tools are Milwaukee. So I just grabbed what, you know, seemed familiar, and that's about the best I could do with my limited knowledge. Son, of course, is with me, little Jace. Just excited to be out and about. He doesn't get out too much nowadays with everything that's going on, but decided to bring him along with the girlfriend and headed over to the adhesives aisle now because I was out of wood glue. I had left the top off my last one, and after about a month or so, I guess it's probably pretty dried up and hard. So I wanted to grab a little bit of Tight Bond. Finally made it out of the store back to the F250. We're getting all the materials loaded up. Decided to toss the 1/2-inch plywood on first, since it's the lightest material. And then we're going to take the 3/4 and lay it on top. We've got a pretty wide bed on this F250 with the extended lift gate. It's an electric lift gate, pretty handy in most situations, but not going to help us get this wood in the back of the truck. If it was a fridge or a washer dryer, it'd be pretty quick and easy. Just tossing some old rods and stuff I've got sitting in my tail box out of the way so that we can slide the materials underneath it. This is why I recommend people buy toolboxes that aren't fully depth or full depth, that go all the way to the bottom. And we're just going to throw the 2x4s on top. Alright, so we've got everything paid for, everything's strapped down, ready to go. Thinking about getting ready to get out and pull out the parking lot so we can get back, make the use of the last little bit of daylight that we've got. So I just took 2 straps, I strapped the 2x4s together. I wasn't worried about the plywood. The plywood's not going to go anywhere, especially with that tailgate that I've got that folds up, so it can't slide out. But I made sure everything was nice and tight and pulling against each other. That way, even if it rotates or slides a little bit, with it being flush up against the back of the bed of the truck, it's not going to go anywhere. So it's pulling it towards the bed and it's pulling it against each other in either direction. So they're not going to fly out. And definitely something I don't ever want to see or be responsible for is material getting loose on the road. Alright, so now we're back at the house. You can see it's starting to get dark, or not as bright outside. It's the end of the day, the sun's starting to set. I got my work truck in the way because I was pulling some of the tools and stuff I use. A lot of it's my personal equipment out so that I have it available as we work on the shop. I also had a bunch of stuff in my garage that I decided to toss in the back of the truck and pull it back to the shop. So I wasn't having to make so many trips back and forth. You know, just trying to do some cleanup as we go. And that's all the wood that's sitting there. I'm just going to have to squeeze it in between that big bush that needs to get trimmed back and the work truck. So now we finally made it to the build phase. We're just going to measure that back wall first. That way we can put up the last piece of the railing we need before we can start building out the rest of the frame. Some people like to do this all on the ground and just pre-make the frames, and that probably would have been easier if I just built 2 7-foot frames and then built a third piece in between to connect them together for the miter saw itself to sit on. But being a novice, I just went ahead and decided to do it this way. That way I can make sure my measurements are good as I go, instead of trying to make sure it's accurate while building it on the ground and then putting it on the wall. So toss up the tape measure that last rail, and it is very snug in between the other rail that we already put up and the door frame. If I had thought about this before, one mistake that I do make here, and I'm not going to fix it, I'm going to leave it as is because it doesn't really bother me that badly, is I probably would have left a little bit of room for the door to swing open, because the door swings into the miter saw station as I have it built now. So I could have probably kept another 1 to 2 feet of space behind the door, and that would have let it swing freely. But as you can see, I butted up right against the door frame. I also make sure to line the screws up with the studs that are behind the wooden boards, just to make sure we have that added load bearing whenever it's on the wall. So here I use a speed square. Just go ahead and mark out my lines, and I try to get everything lined up, or I pre-mark multiple sides, that way I can make multiple cuts without having to constantly bring it up and down. And this is why you build a miter saw station, right? Is so you can just put in stop blocks. All right, so we're using pocket holes instead of glue or other fasteners to put this table together. The reason for that is if I want to take this thing apart and reuse it somewhere else, if I move down the road, because I don't plan to stay in this house forever, I just want to be able to pull it apart. That way I can save money on the lumber cost with lumber going up as high as it has been. Also, if you're a woodworker, you probably see me making a mistake right now. I didn't adjust this jig at all. It's my first time doing pocket holes other than just kind of playing with it when I first bought it. And I think I got this jig. It's a Craig jig, and I think I got it for $100 at Home Depot. Having no experience, having used one, I just thought I'd, toss the block in there, drill into it. But if you're experienced with using pocket holes, you know you're supposed to pull the block up and adjust it based on the size of the wood. So with 2x4s, and I learned this later in the video, if you don't do the pocket holes right, there's not going to be enough meat left on the wood to hold the screw in place, and you're going to break it loose. So I realized that after I put in 2 or 3 boards and I break one, and then I go back, I look at the jig and realize that I'm supposed to raise that block up so it's got more depth on it. So what you see me doing here is more than just playing with my wood. I'm verifying the distance from the wall to the cabinets above it. That way I can make sure I can still reach it. Since I'm doing such an extended width on the tabletop of 3 feet, and the extra inches from the 2x4 being mounted to the wall, so it's a little over 3 feet. I just wanted to make sure I would still be able to reach across and grab them. Even though I plan to build better cabinets and permanent structure to it, for now I need to make sure I can still get to the fasteners and things I've got inside of those bins. So it was at this point that I realized I made a mistake. You can see where the screw broke through the wood. This is when I had to go back and make repairs to the boards that I already put in because I didn't do the pocket holes properly. Just one of those lessons you kind of learn as you go. Like I said, I'm very inexperienced, and this is the first project I've kind of put together on my own, just learning as I go. I probably could have done a little bit more research into doing pocket holes properly before messing this up. So this is what they're supposed to look like, how deep they should be. Luckily, I had some 2.5-inch screws that would make it that far, and I went ahead and put one in just to make sure it would have enough depth to grab. Don't need a whole lot to keep everything stable. And the weight of the table pushing down is going to help keep it where it needs to be anyway. This is just for the legs and the railings. So most of these pocket hole jigs have measurements on the side. As you can see here, I've got mine set to 1.5 inches, which is where it needs to be. It was at the 1/2 inch mark originally. That's where it came defaulted, I guess. And I just left it there whenever I first started drilling the holes in. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start putting the legs in for the workstation. I'm just going to attach it directly to the wall. This wood's pretty hard, so if you could hear the impact driver, it's definitely putting in some work to get these 2.5-inch deckmate screws through the pocket holes and into the boards. I could have done these flat facing, the wider side on the ground, but I wanted to do it like this so that I'd have a raised area off the ground in case any moisture or water were to leak into the floor of the workspace. Everything that I have, because I plan to build shelves or cabinets eventually on this lower side, and I want to make sure everything was going to be raised up a little bit, just in case. I've already had those humidification problems. I tend to have bad luck with a lot of these things, so we're just going to try to avoid it. I'm also going to take the level, and I am going to make sure that the leg as it comes down from the top to the ground is level in all directions, and that way it should help support it, keep it nice and strong and against the wall. And when we get the plywood on top, the 3/4 inch, it's just going to be added weight that pushes down, so this thing's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be moving. I'm not going to attach it to the concrete. I do have a powder actuated gun that I could use to attach this to the ground, and I've got the bolts and everything to do it with, but I didn't think it would be worthwhile. Once we get everything built in and square, it's going to hold itself in place. Now that we've completed the measurements, we've also completed the cuts. We went over to the pocket hole jig one last time before we put the railings and the legs in. We're knocking it all out at once. Doing things like this and these repetitive actions makes the process faster and quicker, so we're just trying to be as conservative with our time as we possibly could be. This DeWalt work table comes in absolute handy on the job site and in the shop still. I just like to use some leftover socket extensions to hold my wood in place. And as you can see, we've got perfectly 90 legs. So we've gone ahead and got the bracing put in. For the miter saw, we did a little bit of extra bracing since that's where the weight and pressure is going to be applied, just to make sure we're good. It also gives us something to put the worktop on. We took our speed square and we took a straight edge, put some clamps on it. I don't know if I did this correctly or not, didn't come with any instructions, but it worked for me. Keeps the skill saw straight all the way across the board. And as you can see, we have a very flush, level tabletop. Even before we screwed it down, everything was lining up the way we wanted it. Got the second half done. And now we're ready to move some bracing around in the center. Since we don't need to keep that spacing, we lowered in two 2x4 braces, and then we're going to set a 3/4 inch on top. Went ahead and put our long level from tabletop to tabletop with the miter saw in the center. As you can see, there's a little bit of a gap on the left side, but overall it's all level, and we'll fix that once we screw down that center board. And here's the final product. Overall, I'm happy and satisfied with the work that was done. I feel like the materials are going to hold up and it's going to be a pretty strong table. If you guys could, just leave any comments below if there's anything I could have done better. I didn't want to glue it, like I said, because I don't want this to be a permanent structure. I want to be able to take it down if I ever need to, or make changes to it. Especially with the length that it's got, I'll probably try to put something else in there. And eventually we'll be doing an upgrade to it where we put in cabinets, drawers, and other means of storage. So hopefully you guys keep following along. If you could, like, subscribe if you made it to this point in the video. Appreciate any advice you have. Thanks.